Welcome into K-StateOnline. I am Mason Voth. That is Drew Galloway. Friday the 17th. We sit here because no game to talk about this week, so no preview show with DY. I think he also might just be ducking, given the fact that he's been falling off in his picks lately. I didn't look to see what happened last week. I just know that I didn't have a catastrophic week.
Yeah, that's why I'm here. It's a rare Friday.
Let's see here.
You went to the bullpen. It's a bullpen day.
Well, it is postseason baseball, and managers love to just overthink the hell out of all their games now. Let's see. What did DY have here? It doesn't look like it was good. No, it was not good for DY last week. 1-2, and he barely got his one because it was BYU minus 2.5. But he just disasterfully had Michigan State minus 8.5 and Oregon minus 7.
Oof.
Those didn't go very well. If you can remember correctly, I went 2-1 though. I had A&M 7.5 and then the over in K-State TCU. The only one that didn't work out for me was the over in Red River, which I did say beforehand. I was like, you'd have to go back a ways to find the time that they didn't score at least 44 total points in that game where both teams scored a touchdown. Of course, Oklahoma didn't score a touchdown last week in that game. But I would also say, what are you doing starting a quarterback that is clearly not healthy enough to throw the ball if you're Brent Venables? Because that was disgusting to watch last week. It's just every time I got a chance to peek down at what was going on in that game, it was, oh, look, it's John Mateer who doesn't have the ability to actually throw the ball right now being asked to throw the football. So
that's the man that knows he has to beat Texas to keep his job.
It was a loss for me, but it's one of those I just go, tough stuff. But anyways, we won't have those this week. Things start to even up there. I do think this is also because more than anything, DY is worried about what's happening in the KSO Pick'em that we've been doing all season, thanks to BetMGM and the fact that it didn't look good for me at first when I was totaling him up from last week. I was like, ooh, DY's getting himself a big cushion, but he did not close very well in the later games last week. And so I have taken the overall season lead now by a game over him. So
I was talking with some friends about our pick'em that we've done, and it's not like my record is like terrible.
No, it's really not. You had like 1 or 2 bad weeks really early, and it set you behind the 8 ball. But it's really not that bad.
Set behind the 8 ball in week 1, but like we're all doing pretty well. Like 46% win percentage for me is what's in last. So like we're doing pretty well. When you're picking that many games, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, we've picked 148 games against the spread this year so far. And 75, 71, and 2 for me, 74, 72, and 2 for DY, and then 68, 78, and 2 for you. And I did note that kind of oddly enough, both of our pushes have been games featuring Alabama this year. So, and you had a good week last week, 11-9. So
this was the first week that I've had the advantage of being the person that picks last. Usually I'm the one that picks first.
Yeah.
So I'm usually the tone setter. This time there's a few that I'm on an island in this week that I'm a little concerned about. But it's also the week that we agree the most, which is interesting.
Yeah.
All 3 of us. I think we have 9 of, I think there's 20 games this week.
Yeah, there is. The ones that concern me there would be TCU and South Carolina. We all seem to like. I will say, I am by myself with Louisville and LSU early on there. You and I both like Duke. So it's going to be fascinating and fascinating stuff in the Big 12 this week, which we'll talk about at the end of this one, as this will be kind of like a pseudo preview show, despite the fact that there's no K-State game. And then also we have Big 12 games that we can talk about. But K-State now sitting at 3-4. They sit on a bye week. KU sitting on a bye week as well, the product of both teams playing in week 0 this year. And we'll talk a little bit more, start to give more of that build up and love to the rivalry game that's coming up next weekend. But just in terms of K-State specifically, we did our KSO rankings of the Big 12 today, and you had K-State the highest at 10. K-State ended up totaling out to being 12th in the rankings. That is thanks to DY and I both putting them at 11. Known hater, has them at 12. So it's weird because based off of what I've seen over the last 3 games, I would tend to believe that K-State's better than Arizona. They're better than Kansas. Obviously, we saw what they just did to TCU. And there are some teams ahead of them that I think that they could probably beat, that they even go beyond those. But are we still in a point where, because like we could rank these teams like in knowing that somebody could have much more left in them in terms of what they could achieve, but we can evaluate through the eye test. Like there could be a team that finishes the year at 6-6 that we could say is better than a team that's 8-4. Like if that team started 8-0 and lost their last 4, and then some teams started 1-6 and won their last 5, then we could say, okay, hey, look, we kind of know how this works. In that situation for K-State, are you of the mindset that their last 3 games would have them higher than the 10th that you put them at, and they're just in 10th because you can't obviously erase what happened those first handful of games this season, and also probably a little bit of, because for me it'd be being scared that team could show up at any other point again, and you don't want to look like an idiot saying, I think K-State's actually the 6th best team in the Big 12 right now. It's like, I don't know that I can go that far yet. So I was curious on how you view this K-State team right now.
I think right now they're comfortably in the upper half if you just go on the last 3 games. Like they clearly have turned a corner of some sort. I talk about it a little bit in just my questions for the bye week is like, it's not, are they really ascending? Because I think that you're kind of being a little ignorant and wanting them to be worse than they are if you don't think that they're getting better. Like it's clear that the team that played against Arizona, if they lined up and faced the team that played against TCU, the team that played against TCU would beat that team that was horrible on that Friday night in Tucson by 2 scores, maybe even 3. So like they're clearly getting better. But like how much is it, you're facing UCF, who isn't very good, although UCF has been a little bit feisty and has a lot of fight in games, and they never really fought back against K-State. So I don't know what that really says there. You played a Baylor team that has its warts and has its flaws. And then you played a TCU game that, that TCU team that played last week in Manhattan would struggle to win many games in the Big 12 this year. So you kind of, and that's why like we're going to talk about the Big 12 in general later on. That makes that game that this weekend, TCU and Baylor, so fascinating. Is like both of those 2 teams. I don't know what to expect when those 2 teams kick off tomorrow, but like they're getting better. But is it just a product of who they played, or have they really kind of turned a corner? So I think that they're clearly in that upper half now, if you just judge it on the last 3 games. But you get very worried about what could possibly come and who, like the other team that could play, because there were a lot of low points early on this season. But the thing that like goes back to me, the lowest point of the season was looking lifeless against Arizona. Like I think that like
after Arizona gave you like the opportunity to be back in that game, like K-State didn't earn a single one of their points in that game.
So that was like the low point of the season to me. Like the loss to Army felt more fluky than anything else, with just kind of how it played out. And like K-State barely had the ball in the second half and whatever. The North Dakota game, you looked bad, but you looked better in that game than you did against Army. And then the game in Ireland, it just kind of was what it was. So you kind of worry about that team that played against Arizona coming back, especially because K-State hasn't won away from Manhattan yet. So that kind of is a cause for concern when you're looking ahead. But they are clearly getting better, like in the upper half. But I don't know who I would like put them ahead of. That's in that upper half. It feels weird because I think that they're a lot better than what they were last year. But like Houston at 5-1 feels a little fraudulent.
Yeah, it's just some of these teams are in a weird spot. If you go and look at, like, yeah, Houston is one that I go, okay, like what what to really make of them, because I don't know. It's just hard for me to buy into what I've seen so far. Where they've been fine, but I still think that there are probably some teams better than. But we know others are battling through injuries. Like Arizona State is in that. They didn't have Levitt last week, so how do you really measure what they did without him? And if he can come back quick enough, then it's kind of insignificant that he was hurt. They just have to take care of business after this Texas Tech game the rest of the way. Iowa State, same type of deal, but the difference would be is that Iowa State, you look at them and say, well, they might be in a situation where those injuries are more long term and impactful, and the offense doesn't have as many guys hurt for them as what is presented there. So they might have some flaws opening up there. And like, it's not like Iowa State's offense has been wildly successful this season at times. They've had some lower scoring games, and so it's been a little bit more limited. It's just the defense was good enough, and you played some teams that kind of helped you out along the way, and now you're not getting that opportunity anymore. So it's going to be interesting. I think the next 3 weeks are really going to determine what we think of these teams and sort things out a little bit better, because like K-State record-wise is not good. They've not had a good season. They've been one of the bottom 6 teams in the Big 12 to start this season. But the way they're playing right now and what their trajectory looks like feels better than, like where Iowa State might be headed right now.
I was about to say I would rather be where K-State is at over the last 3 games than Iowa State.
Yeah, and here's the deal. Like, this is where it sucks, because it has put K-State in such a like boom or bust type of season. I mean, very 2009 of them, the way that this thing works out. Like, K-State, the only way that they can achieve a respectable record is essentially by still making it to play for the Big 12 championship game, because they would go 7-2 in Big 12 play like they kind of needed to all along. And so they end up being 8-4, and they get there, because if you come up with anything short of that, then it's not very good. Like, K-State's in this spot right now. We know at 3-4 that you can only sustain 2 more losses if you want to go to a bowl game, which is like that very low level marker of, okay, it wasn't the biggest failure that a season could be, but 6-6, if you're a knowledgeable football fan, 6-6 should make you want to throw up whenever you see a team that's 6-6. I see a 6-6 team, as long as it's not like the team's been bad forever and it's the first year head coach or something. I see 6-6 and I go, that team's dog crap.
Yeah,
so
6-6 would feel gross. I will say I'm not usually one that like loves 7-5, but if you can start 3-4 or 1-3 and end 7-5, I think that with that context, you would take it.
I mean, this team could very easily end the year with 8 wins still. If they could go 7-5 in the regular season and then win their bowl game, and it'd be the most, like, people would be so pissed off at Chris Kleiman for him to get his 8th win that he loves so dearly and do it in that fashion. But that's where, like, now we are in the stage of, and this is kind of the beauty of football, is that what you do in your conference is still really all that matters. And so that's how, like, you're going to be great. Now, again, that's why I go and say K-State put themselves in a situation where by starting in the year 1-3 and going 1-2 in conference play to get something to get it going. Well, like, you're in a situation where if you go 4-5, well, that doesn't get the job done for you. You're and not 4-5 is not good either, but like 5-4, that's going to put you closer to what you would want to be. It's just not going to look good because you're at your 6-6 overall, and so but if K-State ends here at 6-3 in the Big 12, given who they've had to play, then you're probably in a situation where you need to be considering K-State when we get to the end of the year as being, one of the top 5 teams when we do Big 12 rankings then. And that's what I'm trying to illustrate here is that while it's not been fun and there are flaws, like it's clear, like you said, this team is getting better and playing closer to how, a lot of teams in the league would like to be able to achieve. And this team is playing like one of the better teams in the Big 12 right now, like it or not, because they easily handled UCF. That was never really a question. Like it was comfortable the whole time. They should have beaten Baylor. Like as we talked about at length, the coaches cost them that game. But like I think Baylor's going to still be a fine team, and they've obviously they got a chance to do some good things. And then you handled TCU at home, and I don't care if people look at it as fluky or not, but like this is what has always been my argument is that number one, K-State probably did some things to help TCU look that bad. And then if a team looks that bad, well, that's kind of water finding its level where it's like, yeah, but you can't just take all this out and say, well, if TCU didn't do this, this, or this, then the game's different, but they did do it. And that makes them a not very good team right now. And it makes K-State a better team than them because they didn't do those things. And you look over the last 3 weeks, K-State hasn't done that. Have there been missed opportunities? Yes, but they only have the one turnover during that stretch. It just so happens to be a backbreaker on a pass and a play that should have never occurred. But again, that goes back to the coaching thing more than anything that I would put it on. But like that's where just trying to set the scene for where K-State's at right now. It's weird. It's awkward to talk about this team because you just don't know who you're going to get yet. But like K-State's a handful of games away from going, okay, we're back to being able to trust the product that's going out on the field every game, like we were for the first 8 games of last season before, the last 5, you go, I got no idea what to expect.
Remember, this feels like a lifetime ago at this point, but like right after the North Dakota game, like leading up to the Army game, you asked me what I thought of like how the first 2 games have gone. You got the next 2 coming. And that's when I said, if K-State can somehow get to the bye week 3-1 or 2-2, I feel pretty good about where things would be the rest of the season. Obviously, they didn't do that and went 1-3. But these last 3 games and getting after that past that first bye week is why I thought that if they could somehow make it work, that we would be talking about them in a lot different light, because clearly they're a different team after that first bye week. And, we are either Baylor missing a field goal or K-State stopping them on the 2-point conversion or converting and getting a touchdown instead of having to kick a field goal later on in the game, away from sitting here and saying, for as crappy as that first half of the season was, K-State's 3-1 in Big 12 play with, the 5 games to go. Everything is right in front of them, even though they're only 4-3. So like that is kind of how small that the margins have been this season. I mean, they're even like if you really want to go back and like pinpoint like certain things that are like, wow, like knowing what we've seen over the last 3 weeks, you wish they've had this back. They are Jerron Tibbs making a great catch against Army at the end of that game, away from tying that game or taking the lead because there was still a lot of time left at that point of the catch, no catch. I thought it was a fumble, but was incomplete. They were that away from tying that game and potentially taking it to overtime. And you never know what happens in overtime, but K-State's probably the better team, even though we've seen everything that's happened this season because of how poor Army has played at a lot of points this season. They are just waking up on offense and figuring everything out, and Arizona begging them to take the game away from maybe stealing that one on the road. And then again, like we're just talking about this being so different. So the margins have been very thin this year. It is why like they're going to be, I think, in every game the rest of the way. And I did like one of your bold predictions for the rest of the season is that K-State's probably going to beat somebody that they shouldn't. And if you look at the schedule, that's either going to be, from a talent standpoint, either the game in 2 weeks against Texas Tech or that game in Salt Lake, because they are as talented or more talented than the other teams on the schedule. So the way that this season has gone, K-State could win in Lawrence next week and then figure it out and beat Texas Tech in Manhattan. Because if they beat KU, I think that atmosphere against Texas Tech could be one of the better ones of the last handful of years, because Texas Tech could go into that game undefeated in the top 10, riding high.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what time slot that game gets on Monday. I almost wonder if we're going to get our first 6-day selection come Monday for that one, because that's, Tech is getting close to being in that echelon right now of the TV networks are going to want them no matter who they're playing, because they are the story in college football. So you could be getting a marquee time on ESPN or Fox. But like if K-State beats KU, gets back to 4-4, is 3-2 in Big 12 play, and Tech is coming to Manhattan, which it has the reputation of being harder for some teams.
And K-State's beat Texas Tech 9 times in a row.
Yeah, you're looking at a situation where that's going to be a significant game. So on that, before we move on here, I'll ask you this now. And some people might laugh at it, say it's ridiculous. It is kind of a ridiculous premise, but I am all about giving people some insight into, what is attainable, how close is it, what is the feel, what is the vibe right now. We're going to do this until K-State loses again. So knowing that there's a very good chance that this ends after next weekend, like, because again, we've talked about this team. They have not been good at times this season. So like if the team that played against, I don't even know that Army is a good example, because the game, in fairness, was weird. K-State should not have lost it, but it was a weird game. And you go and look at it's like, well, the offense actually wasn't like that bad. They just didn't have the ball that much.
The team that played in Ireland would still that's probably like the closest they've played to like playing well and losing. And they didn't even play particularly well in that game.
Yeah. So like Arizona, like the team that played Arizona could show up at any point and they could lose by, they could just get manhandled in Lawrence next week.
I mean, there's also a chance that KU is talented enough that K-State plays well and also loses.
Yeah. But game hasn't happened yet. So until K-State gets their third loss, just entertain the thought, entertain the people here, Drew. You 0% to 100%. The unofficial Drew Galloway K-State chance of making the Big 12 championship game back on. What percentage chance do you give it as we sit here on Friday the 17th?
2%, and that even might be a little high. You never know what team is going to show up right now. And then, on top of that, you are basically 2 games behind Baylor because you don't have the tiebreaker there. You're basically a game behind Iowa State still, although I don't think that Iowa State's really a threat to make it to Arlington anymore. But like you in a tiebreaker scenario, you'd probably lose to them. And then we've kind of seen that this year, there's such a jumble in the middle that if you go like 6 through 10, maybe even 11, a lot of those teams are pretty similar. I think that the top 1 is Texas Tech. 2 through 4 are pretty similar. 5, I think, is like a standalone spot with Arizona State because they're the only team that like I'm like, okay, I would trust them a lot more than the other ones. 6 through 11 are pretty similar. Then 12 and 13 are pretty solid, and then 14 through 16. And you see that in our power rankings, to be honest.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of traffic in front of K-State that they need to get rid of. There are teams that I think are playing a little bit above their skis. I pulled out Houston as one. Houston's a team that, like, we all picked them this week in our picks to beat Arizona. But would it shock you if they lost? It wouldn't me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fascinating games this weekend in the Big 12 that are going to tell us something one way or the other, like whether it's, West Virginia, UCF at the bottom, or it's, Arizona State, Texas Tech at the top. Like, all of these are going to be, I think, notable in some way to kind of give us an idea of what these teams are. Like, whoever loses Baylor, TCU, they're probably just shutting down their season.
Yes.
They're probably just, we're out of here. Like TCU, to start the way they did and then end up at 1-3 and have your losses be like they've come against Arizona State, K-State, and then would be Baylor. Like that, I think that'd be hard for them to come back from. But like every game this weekend is going to tell you something.
Yeah, and then like I think that BYU and Cincinnati are probably playing a little bit above their skis to the point where like they will probably drop some games. But this is where, you lose the game in Ireland. You can't close it out against Baylor. K-State's 2 games behind those teams.
Yeah.
So like you just need some help there. You can help yourself out by winning in Salt Lake if you go on this tear and just cause like a real big riff of teams that have 2 losses. And if you again look at just teams ahead of K-State, you probably want Texas Tech to run the table because that means that they're knocking everybody else off. And that also means that they would knock off Arizona State in that and give them their second loss. So there's a lot that needs to go right. So 2% still might be a little too high, but 2% felt right. What's your number? Is it higher or lower than mine?
No, I think that's probably right. You're probably in the realm of like, yeah, because it's just every outcome has to happen and go your way. Like K-State has to win out right now. They have to win their last
that is
5 games.
Correct.
So, and obviously you need the other stuff to happen. The other stuff to happen isn't that far fetched. Like really, if you run through it and it's like based off of who's probably going to end up favored in those games, you just kind of need one like upset of like Cincinnati along the way that you would think, but like, so that's Cincinnati has to lose a game to like Arizona or BYU, which they very easily could do. So like that's where I kind of go ahead and say, anything is kind of possible within that.
Cincinnati could lose to Baylor next week. And even if Baylor loses this week, Baylor could beat Cincinnati next week.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's scenarios there like, so, but it's more so about K-State. Look, it's a very low chance because I don't think they're beating Texas Tech next weekend. All the other games I think are very reasonably in play for them to win. That also means that all of those games, except for Oklahoma State, I think are very reasonably within range for them to lose. So I think 2% is probably right. I can go a little bit higher. I'll do 7%. Why not? Because I do think like this team right now, you go and look at the weird Big 12 standings and how they end up looking out. Like they're obviously the 3-0 teams are in a really good spot. So you're going to need them. Now, I think BYU probably going to slide a little bit. I don't think they're that great. I mean, you go look, they've only scored 95 points in their 3 games. And they've given up 72. Like their point differential in those games is a far cry from what some of the other ones are. Cincinnati, same type of deal. They're in a very similar boat where they haven't been like overly dominant in their games. And they tried to let Iowa State win again, and they didn't really pull away from UCF. But I think Cincinnati's shown a little bit more to them. I like Sorsby better than I like Bachmeier. So you're just looking around like Baylor, I think it has the ability to lose more games. Houston, I don't think is going to get through with I think K-State right now is a better team than Houston.
Yeah.
Now, what they've done this season, obviously Houston is better. Like Houston has the better resume. They have.
Do they?
I mean, they're 5-1. That's the better part of the resume. They don't have nasty losses on their schedule.
They've beat 2 teams.
Look, I get it, but like the resume is also not losing to dog crap Army and beating dog crap North Dakota by 3 points and losing to dog crap Arizona. So that's where I say that.
Arizona would be Houston's best win if they win tomorrow.
I mean, right now, if you lined it up right now, who would I rather have, like, of teams ahead of K-State? Say you're just playing an average Big 12 team. The teams that I would rather have than K-State right now, I'll give you BYU for the moment, but I think that could change rather quickly when we see how things go. Obviously, Texas Tech, Cincinnati, yes. Utah, yes. Arizona State, as long as Sam Leavitt doesn't, like, the weird injury thing doesn't last. That's only 5 teams, though, because I would rather have K-State than Houston. I mean, K-State gave Baylor a get. I think I'd rather have K-State than Baylor right now. And I get, like, if you want to say that's wrong because we have the outcome from 2-3 weeks ago where K-State lost by a point, and yeah, that's fine. Like, I think it's splitting hairs there. But I also think you'd rather be K-State than Iowa State right now. Iowa State just has the benefit of they're not bozos that lost 2 ridiculous games in non-conference play that they were supposed to win. And I think you probably would rather be K-State right now than KU, like another one where you're kind of splitting hairs. But this may also be a bit of a surprise to people. Both K-State and KU have played 4 Big 12 games. K-State has scored more points than KU in their Big 12 games. They've also given up less points in their Big 12 games than KU. And while you can look at that and say, okay, well, KU just played some really good teams in there. That's factual. They did. They lost to Cincinnati. They lost to Texas Tech.
But they
also played 2 of the worst. They played UCF and West Virginia. They dog kicked West Virginia, and then UCF. Like, I was a little surprised that UCF had a legitimate chance to tie it or win it there at the end of the game. So, like, I think there's only 5 teams where you very clearly go, yes, I would rather have them than K-State right now in terms of just like I'm riding or dying on what they do outcome wise. And I think there's only maybe 2 that are a 100% yes, I want them. The others, you wouldn't feel as good about it. Like if this challenge was, okay, I got to go watch Cincinnati against K-State, like you're maybe not confident. Arizona State, you're probably not, especially with the Leavitt uncertainty and the BYU thing. Like, again, I've watched enough BYU this year and followed along with it. I go, I don't know. Like, I can't believe that the Mormon magic is working again. I'm glad that it is for a long, like, very nice people. We know that I love Provo last year. I'm a Kalani Satake guy. I just can't believe my eyes that it's still working for them.
But there's a legitimate chance that I guess 4 weeks from now, because they have an off week November 1st. But there's a chance that, like, we're talking about BYU losing their last 3 games in Big 12 play, because they could lose to Utah this weekend. They could lose in Ames, even though we just kind of talked about that Iowa State's sliding a little bit. But that feels like a game Iowa State could win and probably will be favored in. It's going to be probably depending on what happens in the Holy War. And then, they're not going to win in Lubbock. Like, I don't know if anybody's going to.
No. Let me ask you this now. Just to, I mean, it's kind of a pulse check. It's also to get people riled up irrationally because, like, nothing's actually going to happen. Your confidence in Chris Kleiman and this K-State staff, however it looks next year, more confident that they get it flipped around and fixed for next season after the last couple of games, or is it foolish to wash away the concerns that we all had after, the start of the season and even the loss after Baylor, where I think Fan and I both were basically like, it wouldn't be the worst time in the world for a regime change.
Yeah, I think that you're kind of splitting hairs, because I think that you've seen enough in the last 3 games that you think that there are more confidence that they could get it flipped around, because they've made some schematic changes. They made some personnel changes. the offensive line that played against TCU for a lot of the game looked nothing like the offensive line that we expected at the beginning of the year, and was a lot better than the one that played in Ireland. VJ Payne and Wesley Fair swapped positions, and it's really helped both of them. Like VJ Payne actually looks like the VJ Payne that we anticipated, and Wesley Fair made probably the biggest play of the season in the TCU game, with how that game was going and how it looked for a little bit. So you see that, and then they tweaked some coverages. Like that's how Desmond Purnell got his interceptions and everything. So you see that and you think, okay, feeling probably pretty good about where this would be at for next year. But then you do have the pauses of just, the games at the beginning of the year. Why did it take so long for this to happen? It feels like VJ Payne gets his position flipped every year. Why could they not just go with one that he's a lot better at? So that there were just some things of like, even like personnel wise, like, Devin Vass was buried on the depth chart, but now is like probably your second best offensive lineman that's played this year. Like there are just a lot of things that like would make you say, why did this take so long? But then also like the ability to adjust and make a lot of changes and wholesale changes at some points of the offensive line, and how the offense has looked total, and then wholesale changes like defensively and coverages that make you think that they could get it figured out going into next year. But so I would say probably like long-term grand scheme of things, probably about the same confidence level. But it's because, you've just seen the bad, but you've also now seen the adjustments that have been pretty good for the most part.
Yeah, and it almost makes you wonder, like, because of how drastic the shift has been for what they were at the start of the year to what they've been over the last 3 games now, you look back at, last season in particular and go, man, were they not quick enough to try to make some more significant changes when things went poorly against Houston? And I've kind of been on that, where I understand offensive line in particular is where I think you could ask, why were there not some changes made over the last 2 seasons? I get that you want, continuity there. Like those are 5 guys having to work as one. So it's good to have an understanding, but it, even like, this is where we talk about, PFF grades aren't the gospel. The eye test tells you over the last 3 games that since Devin Vass has been playing for K-State, the offensive line has been better. And you go and you look at like Devin Vass's PFF grade, and it's like below 60 or something. You go, well, there's just no way that's true, because it's not like they're playing better teams than what they did when they lost and they looked worse. So that's where I go, like, I wonder if you would have changed something last year and not rolled out like X, Y, and Z in any position, just because, well, they're older, the experience, like we think they'll work well together. And maybe that's a lesson that Chris Kleiman's learning on the fly, is that when things are going poorly, you have to be willing to drastically shift a little bit more what you're doing, because you only had one season where, if you sticking with the same result proved, hey, you're not crazy for sticking with this same thing, which would be 2022, because the losses were few and far between, and obviously that was a really good team. It's just, and we look back on it now, and it's, you can explain those losses very easily, where it's, you lost by 1 score to a team that won the Cotton Bowl, and like, you played arguably your worst game of the season in that game, and you only lost by a touchdown to the Cotton Bowl champ Tulane. And then you look at the TCU game, obviously we know what happened there. Your top 2 quarterbacks, who I think you win the league with, both got hurt, and you had to go to Jake Rubley, who all he decided to do was fail to get 2 inches on a quarterback sneak and then throw an interception on the 2 drives, and it cost you. You went from being ahead to being down double digits. So, like, makes sense. Then you played one of the more entertaining and exciting back and forth games that K-State's been involved in some time, against Texas, and you just came up on the losing end. It happens. It also occurred when, you lost your best defensive back early in the game for a questionable targeting penalty, and your quarterback, who hadn't turned the ball over all year, unfortunately, didn't get some of the help that he needed there, was under duress all night and lost the ball, and you lost the game. But you bounce back. You didn't let losses stack on top of each other, and you ended up winning the Big 12. And every game that you lost, you don't go, oh, that was just disastrous. How do you lose that game? At least in hindsight, we can look at that. But every other season, you can go and say, okay, well, like some of this kind of snowballed. There were probably changes or adjustments you could have at least tried to change the trajectory of what's happening. And that's where K-State benefits right now, is that they did try some things this year, and it's obviously helped them over the last 3 games. Now we'll see if it continues, because there's a chance that it doesn't, and none of it really mattered. And it's all just, random outcomes and stuff happens, because that's sports.
I bet there's going to be more changes after this bye week too. Like I'm really intrigued to see what rolls out there, because both coordinators are staying back in Manhattan this week and not on the road recruiting, and they did this after the first bye week too, and then you see these changes and K-State's playing better, and then you think, why not do the same thing?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see how it ends up happening, and we look forward to talking more about the game on the horizon, K-State and KU, next week when things get going. Also, will be a lot of basketball talk next week once again, because Wednesday we'll have coverage from Kansas City, Big 12 Media Day there, and then Friday night, K-State, Missouri, the exhibition game that will take place in Columbia. We'll have a reaction to that, so we're going to get a good balance starting next week. It'll probably be pretty football heavy, especially depending on how things go in Lawrence the following week, until that Friday night. K-State faces Newman in their final exhibition, and then the games that actually matter will be here after Texas Tech. So then we get into classic crossover season, and it'll be a good time. But that's the outlook for now. We'll have a full week of shows next week and get everything back on track, add some extra stuff in there as well, and just loads of stuff to entertain you this weekend over at KSO despite the bye week. So head over to On3, get it checked out, and sign up, become a member of KSO today if you are not already one. So for Drew Galloway, I'm Mason Voth. Thanks for watching and listening to the KSO Show. Back again on Monday.